by Wealth, Part 10. What he had just discovered. Kofi's heart pounded as he entered Abena's family house, his mind racing with urgency. He barely had time to explain everything before they rushed to the hospital, the weight of the news pressing down on them all. When they arrived and saw Abena lying motionless on the hospital bed, it was a sight none of them could have prepared for. Her once beautiful face was barely recognizable, her body covered in scars and patches of maggots dotted on her skin. The smell of decay hung in the air, making it harder to breathe. Abena's mother was the first to break, her tears flowing freely as she reached out, her hands trembling as she touched her daughter's frail body. But Abena's gaze was far away, her eyes empty, as though she wasn't seeing anything at all. The doctors had done what they could, but it was clear that Abena was too far gone. Her body ravaged by what she had endured. In a final act of desperation, they called in a pastor to pray over her, but even his fervent prayers brought no physical change. After the prayer, the room felt still, and it was as though the very air held its breath, waiting for a sign. Then something moved. Abena's finger twitched, her dry lips parted, and her mother gasped. Abena's gaze shifted slowly, locking onto her father, who sat silently in the corner of the room. The old man lifted his weary head, trembling as he looked at his daughter. Abena's smile was small but soft, like a quiet relief. After years of suffering, in a barely hearable whisper, she asked, "Are you happy now?" Her father's breath caught in his throat. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His eyes welled up with tears as he stared at his daughter, the realization of his failures too much to bear. Abena's smile deepened, almost peaceful, as she whispered once more, "Are you enjoying your life now?" The smile was the last thing they saw before her eyes closed forever. Her tears no longer rose or fell. Abena was gone. They rushed to call the doctor, and the doctor confirmed that Abena was dead. Abena's father could not handle the weight of the loss. The grief of seeing his daughter die because of him, coupled with the crushing regret of his choices, was too much for him to bear. His mind replayed the decision that led them here, the forced marriage, the belief that wealth could make his family happy and living healthy, the lie that he had sold his daughter's soul for. Now, as he sat beside Abena's lifeless body, all the wealth in the world meant nothing. It was empty, hallowed. His regret consumed him completely. His heart couldn't take it. He collapsed beside Abena's bed, his chest heavy with pain, and with one final desperate gasp, his heart gave out. He died right there, his grief so overwhelming that it took his life in an instant. The pain he had caused, the damage he had done, it all crushed him in the end. In a matter of hours, Abena was gone, and so was her father. Abena's mother, alone now with nothing but the shattered remnants of her family, was left to live with the consequences of their choices. Her grief never subsided. She found herself drifting through each day in a haste, haunted by the memories of her daughter and the sound of her husband's final breath. The regret nagged at her, and though she had learned too late that money could never replace love, she was left to face the ruin of her choices. She remained in the village, living in isolation, surrounded by people who pitied her but also held her accountable for the tragedy that had befallen them all. While Kofi was left broken by Abena's death, his love for her deepened, and now that she was gone, it felt as though a part of him had been rippled away. The thought of anyone else in his life was impossible. The memory of Abena lingered like a constant ache, reminding him of what he had lost. But it wasn't just the loss of Abena that weighed heavily on him. He would not forgive her parents for what they had done to her. The decision to sell her to a man they barely knew for the promise of wealth, Kofi would never forgive them for that. They had destroyed her, and now they were left to face the consequences of their greed. Even as time passed, his anger towards them grew. Abena's death had robbed him of his peace, and he will not forgive those who had played a part in her suffering. The villagers would never forget Abena. They spoke of her with a mixture of pity and regret, recalling the once beautiful girl who had been sacrificed for greed. Her story became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of wealth and the cost of ambition. The name Abena was whispered on every corner, tied to a tragedy that no one could undo. It was a story that lived on in the hearts of those who had known her, a story that would forever be tied to the downfall of her family.